What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of What's the Word, your home for all things sports. I'm your host, Sam Casillas, and let's get right into it, man. We got so much to talk about in the sports world today. We're going to be looking at two leagues in particular, the NFL and the NBA, man. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to dive into in this week's episode. So without further ado, man, let's get into it. So starting with the NFL, decision time in Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys and the GM, Jerry Jones, have a couple of big decisions to make over there for the Cowboys. Let's start with the biggest one, arguably the most urgent one, CeeDee Lamb. And like I said, this is the most urgent matter for the Cowboys. This is a guy who is 25 years old, first team All-Pro. He's coming off of his best season so far, 135 catches for 1,749 yards and 12 touchdowns. So this is a guy who is been balling out for Dallas, and I mean, this is a guy who is at the top of the list. He's arguably one of the best route runners in the league. If you're the Cowboys, you want this guy to be on your team. And I mean, this is a guy who shows no signs of slowing down. Every year he's been in the league, he's been getting better and better. And I mean, last season, he is proving that he's one of the best route runners in the league. He's one of the best pass catchers in the league. And he shows no signs of stopping. So I think if you're the Cowboys, I mean, now you want to sign him as quick as you can, because let me tell you why it's going to be important to sign him as quick as you can, because another one of the best receivers in the league, that being Justin Jefferson over there for the Minnesota Vikings, he's kind of in the same boat. That's a guy who's waiting to get paid as well, and like I said, one of the best route runners in the league, and he's holding out for a big contract. So what I think the two are doing, I think they're kind of waiting to see who's going to get the first offer, who's going to sign first, so that they can then base their contract off of each other. So I think if you're the Dallas Cowboys, I think you really just got to make an offer at CeeDee Lamb, and you know, don't skimp him. You still got to throw the money on the floor. But this is a guy who's worth every penny. I think he's proved it, and I think this is a guy who's going to perform, when the money's on the floor. So I think if you're the Cowboys, you really want to go all in on him right away, because I think the longer you wait, the more the price is just going to go up, and he's worth it. Like, I can't stress that enough. He's worth it. He's worth it. But I mean, the longer you wait, the price is just going to go up. So I think if you're the Cowboys, signing CeeDee Lamb is going to be priority number one, extending him, and making sure he's a Cowboy. This is a guy who you want to stay a Cowboy for as long as you can. So if you can keep this guy on your team, if you're Jerry Jones, you got to be waiting to sign this guy. You got to be ready, and he's a playmaker. You got to have him on your team. I think this is a guy who's shown time and time again that this is a guy you want to build around. And so, like I mentioned, only 25 years old. This is a guy who is the future of Dallas, and I mean, he's done everything they've wanted him to do. So I think keeping him and, making sure he's a Cowboy is going to be number one priority for Dallas and for Jerry Jones. But that's going to bring me on to my next player, which is going to be Mr. Dak Prescott, the signal caller for the Dallas Cowboys. So, this is a guy who has been, let me just say, he's said the most generic, by the book, if you guys have ever played 2K, the most basic generic answers. Anytime he's been asked about his contract in an interview, he's always like, oh, whatever happens. I'm willing to be a Cowboy, but, if that's not the move, then, I'm willing to explore other options. So this guy is literally saying, the most generic responses, and, rightfully so. He understands it's a business, but he also has made it very clear that he's willing to take a pay cut to stay in Dallas. He's made it clear that he wants to stay in Dallas. He wants to win there, and, whatever happens. So it's leaning towards him wanting to stay in Dallas. I think if you're the front office, you do want to, let it sink in a little bit. You do have him for this season, but I think if you're Dallas, you really want to take this into consideration. You have a lot to think about, because you are in a tough predicament when it does come to Dak Prescott. This is a guy who, despite his regular season success, he's coming off one of his best seasons, his best in his career in Dallas. I mean, he posted career highs in completion percentage, in passer rating, and he threw for more than 4,500 yards and 36 touchdowns. I mean, you can't deny it. The stats were there. And another thing he did so well was, minimizing the turnovers. That's really what was killing him so much, in his time, and while he was being QB for Dallas, because these turnovers were killing him. But he did a great job of really just silencing the critics. In the regular season, he did everything they said he couldn't do. He was showing why he was one of the best QBs in the league. But then came playoffs, then bam, he disappeared. So that's what puts Dallas's front office in such a tough predicament, is because you fall in love with Dak Prescott. I mean, you fall in love with the potential. He does just enough to keep that hope alive so you don't pass on him. But I mean, then he'll fold again in the big moments. 2-5 in the playoffs as a starter is not a good look. So, I mean, the Cowboys really do have a big decision to make. But, I mean, they have him through this year, a franchise like Dallas who wants to win, who's made it clear that they want to win, who hasn't won anything since 1996. They haven't won a ring since 96. So, I mean, you got to ball out. At some point, you got to just move on. But I think they're still willing to wait it out with Dak. And, I mean, like I mentioned, you have a baller like CeeDee Lamb who put up all these numbers with Dak Prescott as his quarterback. So, you kind of want to start thinking like, hey, do we break apart that duo? And, that poses more questions. So, the front office, they have a lot to think about. But I think, moving on from Dak wouldn't be the craziest option. You have Trey Lance, who, hasn't really seen any action for Dallas, who's just sitting on the bench. Could they maybe do something with him? Could they maybe be trying to, coach him up and get him going so that he can be the next QB in Dallas? Who knows, But I think, if you're the Dallas, if you're the Dallas front office, it's not a crazy thought to maybe wanting to explore other options, because like I mentioned, Dak, he's been doing it in the regular season, and he's a regular season QB. And until he proves me otherwise, I think it's safe to say that. I think until he proves a lot of people otherwise, it's going to be, the narrative that Dak's a regular season QB. And if you're the Cowboys, if you're fine with that, then I think you can sign Dak Prescott, extend him as long as you want. But the Cowboys want to win, and they're tired of being, that laughing stock of the league, because they do it to themselves. They say, hey, it's our year. But then, they don't perform. So I think if you're Dallas, that thought is there of maybe, parting ways with Dak. But, that's still a ways away. They have him for this season. Let's see, this is contract year. So if Dak wants to stay a Cowboy, if Dak wants to boost his stock, he's got to ball out. And, that doesn't just mean in the regular season. That means in the postseason as well. So we'll see what Dak can do. Like I mentioned, Trey Lance, maybe he can get more reps if Dak, can't stay healthy. But I'm hoping he can stay healthy. I'm curious to see, as much as I'm a Cowboy hater, I'm excited to see, what Dak can do, because he is a good quarterback. He's a good guy on and off the field. But, I'm excited to see just what they do and, how him and CeeDee can kind of just build off of that last year's connection. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to them. And, that's going to bring me to my third player who I really think that the Dallas Cowboys should re-sign is Micah Parsons. And, the Cowboys, the reason why I'm talking about this one third is because they have a lot more time with Micah. They do have him till the end of the season, but I mean, just like CeeDee, this is one of the guys whose price could go way up and way up considering, what they're paying these defensive linemen nowadays. I mean, Nick Bosa is starting a new trend. I don't know the exact numbers. I should have had those ready. But, I mean, that guy's getting the bag and a half. So, I mean, it's not far off until, Micah Parsons gets a bag. The Cowboys can afford it. And, I mean, coming off a 14-sack season, this guy's one of the best pass rushers in the league. And, that doesn't really show it. He wasn't, top 4, top 5 in sacks. But statistically, this guy is one of the best pass rushers on the league. When he's on the field, he makes a difference. And, I mean, statistically, snap by snap, he is one of the best. He is the best pass rusher in the league, highest rated pass rusher in the league, and he's the only defender to accumulate triple-digit pressures with 103 over 2 seasons. So he's been able to get so much pressure on opposing QBs. He's a great run threat. So this is a guy who is, a great defensive piece for any team, and I think you really want to build around him, and you got to understand his value. And like I mentioned, his price is only going to go up. So they still have some time. But depending, similar with Dak, depending on how he performs this year, I can definitely see a new contract on the horizon for Micah Parsons. So I'm excited, for the Cowboys. As like I said, as much as, I hate to say that, go Pack Go, by the way. I'm excited. I'm excited for, Dallas, and just to kind of see how they bounce back and, how Dak plays, how CeeDee plays, how Micah wants to play, because, it's contract year. It is contract year for the three of them. So, let's see how that goes, but, we'll see how that goes. So that's going to bring me into my next point is, did the Kansas City Chiefs somehow get better? And, why three-peating? It doesn't sound impossible. Like you really think about it, the Kansas City Chiefs are the last 2 Super Bowl champions, and three-peating does not sound crazy. And, let me tell you why the Chiefs somehow got better and why three-peating just doesn't sound impossible. So they were able to snag Hollywood Brown. They signed him to a 1-year deal worth up to $11 million. And, this was a great signing right off the bat. Let me just say that for the Chiefs, because that can kind of fill a void for them that they've been missing in that wide receiver room. Let's be honest. Ever since Tyreek Hill left the Chiefs, they really haven't been the same. in that wide receiver room. You know, they've been plagued with a lot of drops, a lot of, like a lot of receivers haven't really been performing as well as they should have. And, Tyreek was a great deep threat, and they lost that when he left. So, although Hollywood Brown really hasn't been putting up these eye-popping stats, he was a little inconsistent in his time with Arizona, but, he's still a great speed threat. And, a lot of that could be said about the QB crisis in Arizona, the coaching crisis, the personnel crisis. But, at the end of the day, I think playing with a QB like Mahomes and a play caller like, Andy Reid, I think it's only going to benefit Hollywood Brown. So, that's just one of the weapons that's going to be added to this Chiefs squad. But let me talk about the next one, Xavier Worthy. Oh my goodness, the fastest man in NFL history. The fastest 40 time ever recorded at the combine, 4.21. Yeah, you heard that right, 4.2140 for Xavier Worthy. And this was a guy who was an absolute stud in college. Worthy last season with Texas caught 1,014 yards for 5 touchdowns while helping the Longhorns make their way to the college football semifinals. Obviously, you know how that ended for them. But, this is a guy who, fastest guy ever to run the 40 in the combine. And, there's to say how much that speed really translates. But, if you're the Chiefs, they drafted that guy. That was a steal, in the first round. And I guarantee you, since the moment they found out that the Chiefs were drafting Xavier Worthy, I guarantee you Andy Reid already started, plotting and, getting ready to scheme some end arounds or some deep balls, some trick plays for him. So they got some speed. And not to mention that Hollywood Brown runs a 4.27 as well. So you got 2 guys, 2 speed threats, and all of a sudden, you haven't had that speed really since Tyreek Hill's been gone, and all of a sudden you get 2 guys who run 4.2s to come run routes for you. So, that's awesome for the Chiefs. That's really been their Achilles heel, is those deep plays, those big momentum plays, because that's where Kansas City thrives. And, when they had Tyreek Hill, you would see them run those big chunk plays, and that's how they got going. That was their bread and butter. They would look to Tyreek Hill, and since he's been gone, they haven't really had that. They haven't really had, much consistent receivers other than Kelsey and Rice, last year. So now that they have these 2 guys, hopefully they can step up. Hopefully, playing with Mahomes and a signal caller like Andy Reid, that can benefit them, because that deep threat game has really been non-existent. And the Chiefs are the team to beat right now. Like, they have the biggest target on their back. Everyone wants to beat the Chiefs, and they're scratching their heads trying to figure out how. And meanwhile, the Chiefs are getting better. So teams are going to be stuck game planning. You can't game plan for the Chiefs now, and I think it's even harder now that they got these 2 studs, these 2 gamers that are, that just elevate their offense so much. It opens up their playbook. It spreads out the field so much. And like I mentioned, this team has been plagued with drops, and the fact that they were still able to get the job done and win a ring, and they weren't even at their best. They didn't even have all the weapons to do so, and they were still able to win a ring. Like they had the most drops in the league. Mahomes completed just 57% of his passes when targeting any other wide receiver. So, not the best. They had the highest drop rate of all the other receivers in the NFL. So just let that sink in. Other than Rashee Rice, there really wasn't anything going for the Chiefs. Travis Kelce as well. So, Mahomes is getting better. The Chiefs are getting better as a team. How do you game plan for Mahomes and, these 2 speed threats, sprinkle in Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco? What do you do? You can't really game plan. So it's going to be interesting to see how people want to play the Chiefs. There's so much up in the air for now, with the whole Rashee Rice incident. If you don't know, he was involved in an incident where he was driving recklessly, street racing, that involved in a 4-car collision. So he's facing some charges, and that could even result in jail time. So he's facing some felony charges. The Chiefs haven't released a statement. The NFL hasn't really released a statement, because there's still a lot up in the air of what actually happened. So who knows if that could actually be a really big blow to the Chiefs, or if he's only going to be faced suspension. But, if he comes back, that's only going to make the Chiefs, that much more dangerous. So if that trio of Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce can hold things down until Rice gets back, it's going to be good looking for Kansas City. And then, of course, when Rashee Rice gets back, it's only going to add to that firepower for Kansas City. So it's looking good for them, but I'm excited to see them. I don't know if excited is the right word. I'm kind of scared to see them, because I don't want them to three-peat. I'm so scared. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has just proved how great he is, but I mean, the Chiefs really have the potential to do something so historic, and I mean, you can't help just as a sports fan to not like that, you know? So the Chiefs got better, and the league, you know, the league is back on the drawing board right now, and they are, you know, it's like they're solving a big crime scene. They got all the index cards connecting the dots, like, how do we beat the Chiefs? How do we beat the Chiefs? But, I mean, until we find the answer to that, I mean, the Chiefs are just going to be, the Chiefs are going to chief. So I'm excited to see, you know, what next season brings for them, but that's going to lead me into the next team who I'm actually looking forward to. It's crazy to say this as a Packer fan, but I'm excited to really see how the Chicago Bears shape up in the NFC North. I mean, let's take a look at just what they've done in the offseason. I'll dive into, you know, the draft. I talked about Caleb Williams in a few episodes prior, but I mean, let's just take a look at the wide receiver position for, you know, the last few years. That's really been a weak point for the Chicago Bears in 2023. You know, the front office, you know, last season they felt like they were in a good spot. You know, they had Chase Claypool, St. Brown, DJ Moore, but, you know, the only one of those three who had a strong season was DJ Moore. So, you know, Chicago kind of had to go back to the drawing board as well, and they shipped those guys out. So they were like, okay, we're going to ride with DJ Moore. And, you know, this offseason, that wide receiver group has totally been revamped. And, you know, the starters on paper now, they look really amazing. And, I mean, for the first time in a long time, I feel like the Bears are finally, having some expectations at the start of the season. I mean, now they're starting to get that attention. They're going to be featured on Hard Knocks at the start of the season. So it's going to be fun to see, you know, what they do to prepare with all the noise and all that stuff. But, I mean, they're on Hard Knocks. This is a team who is getting a lot of attention, and we're not used to seeing the Bears. Like, let's be real. We're not used to seeing the Bears with any type of expectations and any type of, you know, thoughts to perform well. So, you know, the Bears have a lot of eyes on them, and I'm excited to see, you know, how well they're going to do with, like I mentioned, DJ Moore. Last year, he had his best statistical season he's had, you know, with 96 receptions, 1,364 yards, and 8 touchdowns, you know. So DJ Moore was the only one producing for the Bears. He was a bright spot for their offense, and they kept him, rightfully so. And, you know, that lack of production was taken care of, you know, in the trade and in the draft as well. You know, they were able to get Keenan Allen from the Chargers. And, you know, Allen has been one of the best, you know, wideouts in the league. Possession catchers. I mean, he's 6'2", 211, but this guy has, you know, great speed, and, you know, he runs great routes, and he's basically like automatic. You throw anything his way, and he's such a great possession catcher. So, I mean, this guy has a huge catch radius. He's had, you know, more than 100 receptions, you know, plenty times in his career. So this is a guy who's going to boost that offense tremendously. And I mean, I'm excited to see, you know, what he can do with Caleb Williams. You know, obviously we don't know what he's going to be like in the league, you know, coming from Justin Herbert, a gunslinger, to, you know, to Caleb Williams. But I mean, hopefully, you know, he can be, you know, really similar to that, you know, that gunslinger aspect, and he can get him the football and let Keenan do Keenan, you know. So I'm excited to see, you know, that part. And then not only that, but, you know, they drafted Rome Odunze with, you know, the ninth overall pick in the first round. And, you know, Odunze, he's a big, he's long, he's fast, he's explosive, and, you know, he's a guy who can make these difficult catches look really easy. You know, he's a guy like Keenan, you know, he has that large catch radius and, you know, excellent rack ability. You know, he can catch the ball, and he can get upfield. He can, you know, get these big plays. So this is a guy who's really explosive, and I think, you know, Rome Odunze is going to complement DJ Moore, Keenan Allen very well. And, you know, you got to sprinkle in, you can't forget about the big fella, Cole Kmet over there at tight end. You know, he's a great pass catching ability, and he gets forgot about, and now I think he's going to get forgot about a little bit more in that offense. So, you know, the Bears surely do have that firepower. And, you know, what's good is that they have the luxury of just mixing those guys up. You know, they can play the slot, they can play the X, they can play the Y, and, you know, they have that luxury now. And I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that this is, you know, this trio has probably been the best trio that the Bears have had since 2013, when they had, you know, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, and Devin Hester. You know, that's not ridiculous to say that, you know. So this trio, you know, has high hopes, and I mean, the Bears are yearning for something good. The Bears fans, they need something good in their lives, and I mean, this trio could be the group to deliver for them. You know, maybe get them back in the playoffs, and you know, maybe have a winning season. You know, so on top of taking care of the passing game, and they actually improved their run game. They were able to sign DeAndre Swift as well, and this is a guy who had a breakout season in 2023 with the Eagles. 1,049 yards rushing, only 5 touchdowns. And, those 5 touchdowns were a lot of times because the Eagles like to run the tush push. So, D Swift would get him to the 1 yard line and then, they just tush push Hurts in. But, 1,049 yards. And this is a guy who's, let's not forget the Chicago Bears were a team who can really run the ball. Like, they weren't terrible. And if you really think about it, like, they finished first in the league in 2022. And then they were second last year in the league in total rushing yards. So, this is a team who likes to run the football. But, a main part of that success was because they had Justin Fields. So, this was a guy who, he had over 33% of the team's total rushing yards. So, with Fields gone, they kind of had to pick up that slack. And, what better way to, fill that void than with D Swift, So, they were great in the pass game. D Swift is great in the pass game. He's definitely going to help that out even more. But this is a guy who's great in the run game. So, the Bears definitely did get a lot better on paper. And, I'm excited to see just how Caleb Williams comes in and how he handles all the noise. But that's going to do it for the NFL side. Let's take a shift over to the NBA. Let's talk hoops. Big time. Big time. The NBA final stage is set. Celtics, Mavs. Man, it's going to be a great series. But let's take a quick dive on the Celtics. Real quick, Boston Celtics were the first team to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals, man. They're going to be representing the Eastern Conference. And, this is a team who's been a favorite from the jump. Pretty much from the beginning of the season, they've been a Goliath in the Eastern Conference. So, I haven't really talked about them a whole lot. But before I dive into them, I really just want to give Indy their flowers. Man, they were playing some great basketball. You look back at that series against New York just to get to the conference finals. They shot 67.1% from the field in that Game 7 to beat the Knicks. So that was historic. They did all they could just to get up to that point. And, if you were actually watching the game, Indy, they were winning. They forced OT. And, coming into the series, this was a squad who beat the Celtics in the season series 3-2. They played 5 times. Indy was able to win 3 times. So, they could hang with Boston. And, they were hanging around with them. They forced OT. But, man, hats off to Boston. Hats off to Jaylen Brown. He was playing out of his mind. And, he was really the star of the series. And, he got recognized with that MVP trophy. I'm so happy he did because this is a guy who gets constantly undermined. Playing with Jason Tatum. And, Jason Tatum's a baller. He could have easily won that MVP trophy as well. But, I'm glad that, Jaylen Brown finally got his flowers. And, some people throw dirt on the Celtics name. They're like, oh my God, the Celtics, they had a cakewalk. They played an injured squad. But hey, at the end of the day, it's playoff basketball. You got to play who's in front of you. And when it comes down to the playoffs, it's the healthier squad usually wins. And at this time, it was the Celtics. It happened to be the Celtics. They had an injury of their own in Kristaps Porzingis. And I think, they're going to need him in this Dallas series in the finals if they want to, really be successful. I think they can still get the job done, but he's going to be a vital part for them, if they want to win a ring. But they were injured with Porzingis, but they were criticized. This is a Boston team who was constantly criticized for, they let them hang around, they're playing with their food, but it's like, no, like this is a team who's been good. And, so we got to give them their flowers. I'm excited to see how they match up against the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks punched their ticket, but let me just say right away, Wolves fans, cover your ears. The Wolves are indeed not back. The Wolves are indeed not back. And, that was my pick. I kind of maybe jinxed them in the last episode. I said, hey, the Wolves are looking like a pure lock to represent the Western Conference and make their way over to the finals. But boy, was I wrong. Man, Luka Magic and Kyrie exposed the Wolves. Man, that was a good old fashioned butt whooping right there. That series was crazy. And let me just say, Minnesota was absolutely gassed still from that Denver series. Those guys were not looking like themselves. Ant was looking gassed. He wasn't looking as aggressive at all. And let me just say, Karl Anthony Towns, my guy, shooting 1,500 shots a day for no reason, bro. Like, those were not falling. 1,500 threes a day for no reason, and you were shooting like 0 for 9 in a playoff game. Like, man, like, give it up. Like, at some point, you gotta remember you're 7 feet tall, bro. And, like, I get it. Shoot or shoot. I'm all for that at the end of the day. But, man, in a time where you desperately need a win, you're fighting for survival, that's not how you play. And I mean, just, Minnesota seemed content with, not getting swept and just winning that one game. They had no desperation, it seemed, after that in that game 5. Like I said, they seemed like they were just really content with getting swept. And, it was tough to see. I was really excited for them. And, hats off to the Dallas Mavericks. They played outstanding. And, really you got to pick your poison with Kyrie or Luka. Who do you want to double? And, they were absolutely picking apart the Timberwolves defense and making all the right decisions. And mind you, that Timberwolves defense was ranked the number 1 in the NBA. That's not an easy thing to do. So the fact that the Mavericks were doing it with ease and, they were making them look like a JV team out there. Kyrie and Luka, orchestrating the whole thing. They were making the right decisions every time. They made the adjustments. Minnesota would send a double team. And in game 1, what really was killing them, despite they were still able to win, was, Kyrie and Luka were picking up their dribble when Minnesota was sending help. And really, they weren't really sending a true double. They would send, kind of like this soft double, and then, the help defender would bounce back. And, what really made the adjustment was in game 2, instead of picking up their dribble, Luka and Kyrie would recognize that soft help, and they were able to penetrate it, and they were able to, drive and kick, and, drive and get the easy layups and the easy alley-oops. But, they were just making the adjustments. They were driving and kicking, and, when you give those two easy layups and easy shots around the cup, they're pretty much automatic. Kyrie's the most skilled finisher in the league. Argue with the wall. But, this is a guy who is automatic. And, when you have a duo combining for 60 points plus, more than once, good luck. Good luck beating him. And, there's no shot. First pair of teammates with 35 points in the same game in Mavs history. And, they had their foot on their necks, man. It was wraps over there in Minnesota. And we have another good duo over there in Boston. Tatum and Brown, the same can be said for them. They're actually averaging 60 points a game combined in the series, in the playoffs. So, there are no scrubs over there in Boston. We got a battle of the duos, and let me just say, the pick and roll was working overtime for Dallas. And Minnesota was trying to play it right. Like I mentioned, Dallas was just making the right plays. Minnesota would either blitz the pick and roll, or they would be really soft in the help. And, that's what allowed the Mavericks to get a lot of easy looks and, the big momentum plays. That was probably the most lobs I've ever seen. It felt like I was watching, like, the Lob City Clippers. And 54 alley-oops in a postseason, and that was the most in the last 10 years in the NBA. In the whole NBA, they had 54 lobs in the postseason, and they still got a series to go. So, the Dallas Mavericks, like I mentioned, that pick and roll was working OT, and there was no answer for them. There's no answer for that. And, in theory, it seems like such an easy play to stop. But when you got, like, those guys that are good orchestrators, like Luka, like Kyrie, who are just so good with the basketball in their hands, there's really nothing you can do. And, I really just want to give a big shout out to Gafford. Gafford was one of the ones catching a lot of those lobs. He was hustling out there. Man, his defensive presence was just everything for the Dallas Mavericks. He was a rebounding machine. He was a paint beast. There was one game, man's had 5 blocks for Dallas, and he was averaging double-digit points a game, and that was huge. So, his energy boost, his hustle boost, sprinkle that in with the presence of Derek Lively. This was a team who was just playing so well as a whole, and they completely took away Minnesota's interior game. So hats off to the Dallas Mavericks. I'm really excited to see how they match up against the Celtics, and I'm gonna go ahead and take my pick. Dallas Mavericks, America is rooting for you. We do not want to see the Boston Celtics win a championship. So, man, do what you got to do. But that's my pick for the finals. Dallas Mavericks are going to win. And, it's going to be a good series. I think it might go the distance. It could go 7, but I think, Mavs in 6. I think, they're going to get it done. Kyrie's going to get another ring. Luka's going to get number 1. And, that duo is going to be talked about for some time. But, hey, that's going to do it. The finals get started up on June 6th. We'll be all over it on What's the Word and keep you up to speed. But get that popcorn ready, man, for a great series. But that's going to do it for today's episode of What's the Word. Thank you all so much for joining. As always, make sure to drop a like, drop a comment, and share this to a friend, and then that friend to another friend. We know you got friends, man. We're trying to go viral. We're trying to go worldwide with this What's the Word stuff. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Sam Casillas. This is What's the Word, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.